From the action center of the Twin Cities, News 11 with Paul Majors, Diana Pierce, Tom Ryther on sports, and meteorologist Paul Douglas.
75 seconds after what looked like another perfect liftoff for the Space Shuttle Challenger, an unexplained explosion with the power of a nuclear bomb turned the space vehicle into a ball of fire, killing all 7 on board, including school teacher Krista McAuliffe. NASA says it may never be known exactly what caused the shocking tragedy, but future shuttle missions are on hold while an investigation is made. Good evening. That story tops tonight's News 11.
The fiery accident sent a shockwave through our nation and the world.
Also on board the ill-fated shuttle were Mission Commander Dick Scovey, who piloted the Challenger in 1984. He was married with 2 children. Co-pilot Michael Smith, one of the Astronaut Corps' most experienced pilots, married with 3 children. Gregory Jarvis, a payload specialist in charge of space experiments, married and the father of 3. Judith Resnick, an electrical engineer and one of the first women in the Astronaut Corps. Ellison Onizuka, a space veteran and the first Japanese-American in space, married with 2 children. And Ronald McNair, the second black American in space. His wife, Cheryl, works at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. And, of course, teacher Christina McAuliffe was also on board. She leaves behind a husband and 2 children.
McAuliffe's parents were among those on the side of today's shuttle launch. At first, it wasn't clear to Grace and Edward Corrigan what was going on in front of their eyes, but it soon became tragically obvious that something had gone drastically wrong. Tonight, they are with other bereaved family members in seclusion at Cape Canaveral. And at the New Hampshire school where McAuliffe taught, the liftoff brought cheering, but when the explosion occurred, the students were stunned into silence. Faculty members, numbed by the accident, sent the students back to their classrooms, and school was dismissed a few hours later. Most students said they'd learned a painful lesson about life.
I felt as if my whole body blew up inside when I saw that, and I can just never be as shocked as I am now.
McAuliffe had often told her students she was more excited about her adventure than she was afraid of the risk she was taking.
For many teachers in our area, the tragedy hit close to home because they had also applied to become the first teacher in space. Apple Valley teacher Katie Koch-Leveen is one of 2 Minnesota teachers who was in the final running to be aboard today's flight.
We heard the loss of someone who I spent time with in Washington and felt close to. And the mission was great. It's America's way of bringing kids closer to the space program. And it's a great sense of loss from a personal point of view and loss of the mission.
Well, Levine says she'll continue to wear her space buttons. One of them says, "I want to go." And she still says she'd like to be aboard a shuttle mission someday. And other area teachers who wanted to get aboard today's shuttle flight are dealing with their special sense of loss. Tonight we hear from 2 of them in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Joan Steffen leads a team report.
When that shuttle goes, they might do one body. But there's going to be 10 souls that I'm taking with me.
Krista McAuliffe joyfully accepted the mission of teaching the world about space. She was our ambassador, the face we knew in what had become an almost faceless shuttle program. And science teacher Steve Bramer of Wanamingo had wanted badly to be in her place this morning.
I can't describe that I've had any feeling of relief, you know, just kind of a confusing feeling that maybe I have to have time to sort out.
Bramer was one of 2 Minnesota teacher finalists in the contest McAuliffe eventually won. The glorious adventure was what attracted him. The danger was not a concern.
All you thought of is the program and how much fun it would be to be on the launch, and you didn't really think about the other aspects of it, although it was always there, and we all realized the dangers.
This bulletin board shows how Bramer involved the students and faculty in his exciting dream, but now they share intensely in the nation's nightmare.
Further reaction from the Republic of Ireland.
Still, Bramer says in time, if given the opportunity, he would try again for his own chance at space. But the message Steve Bramer wants us left with is that he understands that this is a tragedy and he cares deeply for the family and friends of those on board. But we should look on this as a reason to pursue and perfect the space program, not a reason to quit. Joan Steffen, News 11, Wanamingo.
I'm Andrea Shane. Class was over at Toma High, but a few students stayed, and there were questions that seemed to go on forever.
The speculation is that something went wrong with that external tank, and therefore...
Larry Shekel tried to answer them, tried to stick to the facts, and put his stunned reaction aside. He knew Krista McAuliffe.
She was very quiet. It's a great personal loss to her family. I really couldn't believe it to begin with, but then they just very, very sad about it.
Now he watches her on television and remembers when he and the other teacher finalists were at Cape Kennedy.
They all shared laughs and the thought of an unbelievable challenge. And everyone took something home from that trip, something that this teacher keeps in his classroom.
There are lots of rockets in this physics classroom, but for the first time in his life, he has no desire to be inside one. And to say the least, he's thankful he was not the finalist on board this flight.
That's a selfish kind of thing, but I think that's a feeling that everyone goes through that says, I'm glad it's not me.
So are his students.
Right after I heard about it, I was just thinking on how if Doctor had been on it.
There is relief at Toma High, and for Larry Shekel, there is grief. Today, he lost a dream and a dear friend. Andrea Shane, News 11, Toma, Wisconsin.
School children throughout the nation were getting set for live lessons from space by satellite with Krista McAuliffe as their teacher. But the promise of lessons about space today turned into a painful lesson about the risk every space pioneer must take for the sake of knowledge.
Chance that they'll be able to bring back something really important and vital to all the millions of people here back on Earth, then it's worth it.
Area teachers tried to help their students come to grips with today's tragedy by comparing space explorers with the adventures of continental explorers long ago, many of whom lost their lives trying to find out about the unknown.
President Reagan gave an emotional eulogy for the astronauts to the nation's television viewers today after calling off tonight's State of the Union address in light of the accident. He called the 7 astronauts heroes and said their sense of adventure served to benefit all of us.
They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover its truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us.
Mr. Reagan also promised the space program will continue, and he said another teacher will get a chance to ride in a space shuttle in the future.
NASA officials have impounded all information about today's Challenger flight, right down to the personal notes taken by the astronauts. They say it will take up to a year to make a final report, and other shuttle missions are postponed until they sort through what happened today. And Mary Stuckey is live now from the Johnson Space Center in Houston with word of how some who have returned safely from space feel about the tragedy. Mary?
Well, I'm sitting here in front of a mock-up of the space shuttle used for astronaut training. Some people are working very late here tonight trying to piece together what happened. They express a great sense of shock, and NASA employees say they accept the risks of manned space travel. We talked with one of the first shuttle astronauts.
I think a lot of the risk is concentrated in the first couple, 3 minutes of flight. That's a very demanding part of the flight in terms of demands on the vehicle. You are dependent upon 5 rather powerful engines all burning properly. There are a lot of aerodynamic forces on the vehicle. There's a lot of acceleration. There's some vibration. There are a lot of stresses on the vehicle, and there are not many alternatives.
Despite their knowledge of the risks, NASA employees in Master Control today in Houston were in a state of shock. It's a tremendous tragedy for many of these people who've devoted their lives to the space program. NASA in Houston is like a huge city that can't believe this tragedy. All day, people huddled around TV sets, hungry for information. Records here are being impounded, and much of the information and investigation will probably take place here in Houston. Tonight, few people are willing to speculate about what might have happened, but they do express a great sense of loss. That loss is also being felt in Florida, of course. Tracy Lyons is at Kennedy Space Center in Florida with more on the search for the answers.
Tonight at a darkened Kennedy Space Center, the viewing stands are empty. The countdown clock continues to tick away the minutes since the launch of the Challenger, a launch that ended in tragedy. This evening, the families of the astronauts who had come here to watch the launch are being debriefed by NASA officials, but they're not getting much information. And all the flags here at Kennedy Space Center are flying at half-mast. At NASA's press center, journalists from around the world are filing their stories, but there are few facts to report. There is, however, much speculation about why the shuttle went down.
There's 3 naval ships out there, 2 guided missile frigates and a guided missile destroyer.
For NASA officials, there is still much to be done. The search continues for debris from the explosion.
There's 7 ships out in the recovery area, and they're going to stay out there all night doing whatever they can in the dark. The aircraft had to come in at sundown. They'll be going back out at first light.
The hope is that whatever is recovered will offer some clue to the tragedy of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Tracy Lyons, News 11, Kennedy Space Center.
The locally based Honeywell Corporation has a major stake in shuttle missions and has from the beginning of the program. Honeywell makes the main engine controller for the shuttle, which monitors the engines for malfunctions. And Honeywell manufactures the Space Class Flight Control System, which controls the stability and altitude of the shuttle. Several other Twin Cities companies are involved with the shuttle missions. 3M manufactures a type of insulation and has conducted zero-gravity experiments on board some flights. A local company called Sheldol makes other heat-resistant materials out of gold and silver for the shuttle. Rosemount of Eden Prairie makes temperature sensors used in the missions, and Control Data provides some computer equipment used in NASA's ground control. And the shuttle accident means the loss of an experiment by some University of Minnesota scientists. They're trying to find a way to grow vegetables in space using a special kind of ground-up rock found in just a few places around the world, including the Duluth area. The researchers say their experiment is now on hold indefinitely.
In St. Paul tonight, what was to be a gala event in celebration of the shuttle program was vastly scaled down after today's accident. Alan Costantini takes us to the Omni Theater, where moviegoers were reminded of the dedication required of every astronaut.
Teary-eyed. Lots of people around us were teary-eyed.
Despite the disaster in space, or perhaps because of it, hundreds of Minnesotans turned out at the Science Museum in St. Paul to watch the new Omni film about the Space Shuttle program. It is called The Dream is Alive and features Minnesota astronaut George Pinky Nelson. But special guest Nelson was not there. Obviously upset, he left the Twin Cities for Florida earlier in the day after making a brief statement to reporters.
I hope you'll understand. I'm anxious to return to be with my family and the families of my colleagues. And I know you share with me the personal tragedy. Challenger had an outstanding crew. They were certainly professionals, and they were my friends.
The Science Museum decided to go ahead with the premiere tonight anyway. The film features Judy Resnick and Dick Scobie, 2 of the astronauts killed on the Challenger flight this morning.
You'd almost cut it with a knife in there, you know, it was just...
Especially the parts when Judy Resnick...
Yeah, and when it took off and when the commander was shown on the film, I don't know, you can't really say, you know, you can't really say it in words.
The film had a particular effect on young viewers and their feelings about the shuttle program in the wake of the disaster.
I'm really proud of it. I can see all the accomplishments they made up there.
The feeling at the Science Museum tonight seemed to be that the dream is alive, even if 7 of America's space travelers no longer are. Alan Costantini, News 11, St. Paul.
The Omni Theater officially opens its space movie to the public beginning tomorrow.
John Glenn, one of the world's most famous astronauts and now a senator from Ohio, has experienced both the danger and the exhilaration of spaceflight, so his philosophical words regarding today's accident carry special meaning.
I guess in our human existence there is triumph and there is tragedy.
And half-mast flags here and throughout the nation attest to the way Americans feel about the tragedy that can befall those who aim at the highest triumph.